Okay, so while waiting for um, others, we'll just do a quick introduction of who we are and what we do. Um, I'll start. Um, I am Jack Barroso. I coordinate, I'm from Riverside County Office of Education. I'm the administrator for occupational therapists and also coordinate assistive technology services. Um, and we have different contracts with districts. And Janelle over here, which I will answer in a while, to introduce herself, is my partner in completing this AT, especially with the AAC assessments. She's my partner with different presentations that we completed. And also we complete all the assessments and parent and staff training together also. So Janelle, I'm just gonna make you introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Janelle Kay. I'm a speech language pathologist. I'm also a part of the AT assessment team. So Jack and I work together, like he said. And I also primarily service our infant circle program, so birth to 3 in the home setting. In the past, I've worked in school age and supported lots of different programs over the years. So.
So we'll go with, I think we have a little bit more, 3 more minutes and we can start the content, but we are just going to go with our objectives today. We want to, how the participants learns really specific strategies to effectively implement AAC system in different environments. Also, we want the participants to learn the importance of customizing or individualizing AAC system for AAC users, meaning how important it is to make sure that we basically provide um, an individualized layout for whatever AAC device, whether that's a low-tech or high-tech devices, to make sure that it fits the individual students. So that's really, really important. We're not going to go on programming per se, like I'm gonna teach you to do program this, program that. We will. I'm gonna touch a little bit of some stuff, but if we want to go excuse me, for a different programming, for programming how to do layout, that will be another training. So that's what we're gonna do. So the agenda will basically go on the specific strategies. We will show you videos. We will explain how to do the strategies. This is really best if it's done in person, because usually me and Janelle will usually actually do some practice with participants, but I think this is going to be okay. Janelle and her family actually provided nice videos, which I am so glad to say that Janelle gave us permission. If you want to send this to your parents when you're providing distance learning, so they can easily understand what you're talking about, that will be Janelle give us that permission, so you can use actually the videos that we're gonna show you, and we will kind of go into details a little bit. It's really a very simple set of strategies. Basically, it provides structure to what me and Janelle has been advocating and been teaching for a while now. We talk about, it has different names. It has, aided language stimulation, partner augmented input, and all of that other names out there. But it basically is a modeling, but we'll go into the detail the details. So now I think it's 11:05. We're going to go to the content. So we'll start. You want to go, Janelle?
Yep. Okay. So just to piggyback off of what Jack was saying, you will see my family in these videos, and my husband's in them. He has no formal training, and my children are also in the videos. So partner augmented input, like Jack said, has lots of different names. Aided language input, aided language stimulation. Basically what that means is as you communicate, verbally with the AAC user, you're also going to utilize the device and touch corresponding buttons. So basically what that does is it teaches them where things are located, how things are categorized. So the easiest way for me to explain it to people is like all of us are neurotypical people, you're born hearing and you're listening and you're listening your first year of life. All you're doing is listening and you're building all these little auditory pathways in your brain. And by your first birthday, you usually have between 1 and 3 true words that you are expressing yourself. And so this is very, very similar. So basically the aided language input is everybody in the environment building those pathways for the AAC user and teaching them where things are located. So it's really important that the person communicating with the AAC user is familiar with where things are and where they're located. And that's that. So let's go.
Yeah, and with regards to the communication partners, we're talking about not just parents, not just the teacher, making sure that, when we are in school, the instructional assistant, your other related service providers, your occupational therapist, your APE, if you have PE, APE, physical therapist, all of those are communication partners. So it's really important as me and Janelle starts to do a lot of this staff training. We really pull all the IEP team into one table. We're just doing like an informal trainings to make sure that everyone understands on how to use the communication device consistently. And again, it's not just going to be, it's like what Janelle was saying, this is communication, and it's not just going to be requesting. This will be somewhat you're going to use for commenting, for socialization, for greetings, for them to be able to make sure participate during instructions so that they will be able to answer your questions or just sort of said making comments during instruction time. So the way we break down, and again, this is from Dr. Dr. Jill Senner and Matthew Vaught concept. So we already talked about, that partner augmented input, that aided language stimulation. Me and Janelle has been talking about that, but we really like their concept when they break down the strategies to make it more structured. Because even with us, it helped us, and I think it will really help parents to structure what we're talking about, that modeling. So we will break down in the good, so it's easy to remember because it's s'mores and now I'm hungry. But it breaks down into that letters. So S for slow down, MO for modeling, R is for respect and reflect, R for repeat, E for expand, and S for stop. So we're going to discuss these strategies in detail and show some videos. So we'll start with that. Let's go with slow.
One thing that we forgot to mention though, Jack, is that it is the evidence-based way to teach AAC. I don't think that we said that. So the aided language input, and then s'mores breaks that down. So here we go with the slow rate of speech. This one goes pretty fast. Pretty fast. This one, he's slow. True. So tell me which one you want. Oh, you want the one that's fast? So, as you saw in the video, a slow rate of speech, speaking in a slow, clear manner while pointing or touching, activating the buttons as you talk. Naturally, if you're not familiar with where things are located, you will speak slow because you're going to be speaking and you're sort of searching where things are located at the same time. So it kind of happens a little bit naturally. But if you're very familiar with the device, just try to keep that in mind, that you want it to be slow because we want them to be able to see where we're pushing and where things are located.
Yeah, and with slow rate of speech, and we will discuss the stop strategy also that will help the AAC user for them to really process more of the verbal information that you're just providing them, or just trying to input with them.
So it's slow, but it's not unnatural. Just kind of keep that in mind too.
So let's go back a little bit to that one.
This one goes pretty fast. Pretty fast. And this one, he's slow. So tell me which one you want. Oh, you want the one that's fast?
Again, just like what Janelle said, it should be more a natural slow and not a very, very slow. To make sure that that doesn't happen, we want to make sure that when we are utilizing this, especially even if it's for the very first time, that we also familiarize ourselves. Yeah, whoever the communication partners are, familiarize themselves with the layout. Again, whether that's an low-tech AAC, just like a communication book, to a mid-tech AAC like GoTalk, or to a high-tech like an iPad with Protocol to Go or Words for Life. So that's really important that, and we were gonna really reiterate that, and we'll kind of keep emphasizing how it's important that all communication partners needs to be familiar with the device itself.
Okay, so the next one is modeling.
So that's S. This is your MO from the s'mores.
This one goes pretty fast. Pretty fast. And this one, he's slow. So tell me which one you want. Oh, you want the one that's fast? Okay, you ready to make it go? Okay, ready? Whoa, he flips so fast. He's fast, huh? Fast. Yeah, you want to do it again? You gonna make him go? Woo! You made him go. All by yourself. Okay, so the next one is model. So we keep reiterating this. So you're gonna verbally speak while also pointing to or touching the pictures, on the communication device. Many of us, especially if you're a speech pathologist, you are trained to do parallel talk, self-talk. So basically talking about what's happening in real time, talking about the things that you're experiencing, the things that you're seeing. So it might be a feeling, you might be sad, or you might be excited. You might see somebody running. Self-talk is talking about kind of what you're feeling and seeing. Parallels where you're talking about the other person is hearing, seeing. And basically the way that I coach families and teachers is just talk about what's happening in real time. So it's not necessarily questions or demands. It's more you're talking about everything that you're experiencing at that moment in time. It really makes it a lot easier to build those connections, and have meaning behind things. You could push sad all day long, but if it's not corresponding with the way that you're feeling that moment in time, then it doesn't make sense.
So it really is important that your, the goal is to aim for mostly 80% comments or statement and just 20% questions or demands, because that's where I think some of the, pitfalls we get into is that whenever we introduce or present an AAC device, again, whether that's low tech or A-tech, our tendency is to ask, oh, what do you want? Oh, which one, where do you want to go? Like our tendency is that, and we get into that, like, it seems like we're testing the kids. And the worst part, I think, that we've seen and we can experience, and I think it's, it's really important to note, is like, this is not a test. We're not quizzing the kids when we are using the AAC device. We are not. The worst part you've seen is like you present the device and you will say, point to the dog, or point to go, or point to what do you call this one? Point to the pretzels. It's like it becomes like a discrete child method. That's not going to teach communication. And I think that's like, sometimes we get pressured because you want to make sure that the child understand the different icons or symbols or drawings on the device. That's not going to teach the actual communication per se. So just like what Janelle was saying, it really is important that we do the parallel talk and the self-talk whenever we're trying to model. So again, when we're talking about modeling, we want to make sure that it is more of a, make it a very good conversation. We're going to talk about the use of how important the core words is, and that are, when we go to programming the iPad, we want to make sure that core words are embedded. And it's not about, oh, but my kids cannot read, or my kids is very low, or things like that. We have to make sure that we're using these core words, and we don't turn our AAC device into like a choice board. This is a communication device where you can use, this is your new language, this is your device that you can use in different environment, whoever your communication partner is. And again, not just about requesting. There's a lot of purpose of communication. Expect that the child is going to learn this. And we're going to talk about the stop strategy, where we have to make sure that the child will be able to respond and time to respond, to make sure of that. You want to talk about a little bit of this, Janelle?
Sure. So this is a cake, so it's very easy for everybody to understand. So a cake has different layers, and you obviously can't have the top layer without the one on the bottom and the ones in the middle. So the first layer of the cake is exposure. So we're not expecting the AAC user to even push a button or anything at this point. We're just exposing them. Kind of like I was showing you in those other videos, where I'm just using the device and I'm not expecting anything from the AAC user. And then beyond exposure is acknowledge. Sorry, the chat box keeps popping up, so I can't see. Acknowledge is that the AAC user starts to notice and recognize that this is a tool for some purpose, and they might look at it and watch you as you're, communicating and using the device. And then they become curious. So they're watching to see what you're doing. They're starting to learn, like, oh, they're making those connections. And then after that, they might even try to explore it and try pushing the buttons themselves. And we have some strategies that you can use when they start to push buttons or start to try things. Because we want to really acknowledge that. And acceptance is the next one. So they expect you to model things and they're cueing you. And then the last one would be exploration. So when they're actually starting to use the device themselves. Do you want to add anything, Jack?
Yeah, so basically, this cake, we always give this to parents and other related service providers if they want to, just to keep reminding, but we always make sure that when me and Janelle provide trainings, we provide this to parents. Because I think there's that misconception of when I get a device or when I get an AAC system or device for my kid, there should be somewhat always an exchange of communication in terms of I will be able to press the device or my child will be able to point and make one or two word phrases by able to operate and press those buttons or icons. So I think that's always like the expectation. Even the student is an emerging communicator. Just like when I say emerging communicator, that they or he or she is just going, starting to learn, to use the device. So, but again, if you look at it, that point is just like the icing in the cake. The most important part in the very, very beginning, especially when you just introduce this AAC system, is to make sure to expose the kid by modeling, doing your self-talk. Janelle already talked about that, and parallel talk. Those are really, really important stuff. And you, well, you know, we already did this to a lot of our parents and teachers, and it cannot decrease, or at least, you know, decrease the pressure, you know, from the staff and from the teachers, or the teachers and the parents, about, you know, making that exchange. As soon as you get the device, there should be an exchange. There should be, you know, my child should be able to do this, do that device. But basically the most important part is just exposure. Again, we will continue to reiterate about exposing your kids, using modeling with those parallel talks and that self-talk.
And another easy way to think of it too is when you have an infant that you're talking to, they're not necessarily talking back. They might smile at you, they might look at you. So this is similar. It works very similarly. You know, we're expecting them to just be exposed to it. Okay.
The next one is the respect and reflect.
More juice? I know you want candy, but candy's not available right now. You can have candy after dinner, okay? Okay, right now you can have juice or water. Juice. Okay. I'll give you some more juice. There you go. So this is one that comes up a lot. So basically, exactly what you just saw. So the AAC user might touch and activate a button for something that's maybe not available, or maybe it's just a thought. So if it was a verbal child, they might say, "Oh, I wish I could have candy right now." But when they're vocalizing that, you would say, "Oh yeah, you can't have it right now, but later, or maybe tomorrow." And AAC user is very similar. You know, they're thinking of something, so they're activating a button to let you know. So it's really important that we respect their attempts to communicate and respond appropriately.
So it may not, whatever that item, they might be asking whether you think that's just an accidental touch from the device. The thing is, you may not honor that request, but it really is important that we always acknowledge it. And that's the respect and reflect. And it's really important because it really empowers the AAC user. It really gives them that, oh, they're really acknowledging everything. Because sometimes it's just like us, sometimes, you're talking to your friends, you're talking to your kids, you're talking to your family members or colleague, and sometimes, and a snap, you go and, change topic, or it's like, you know what, I feel like I'm just want to eat ice cream today, even though you're talking about some work, I mean, things that happens. And sometimes maybe for them, they were processing this morning, and then suddenly they got the chance and they got tomorrow plan at that time, that I'm just going to press, I want ice cream, Janelle. I mean, then it really is important that we acknowledge those. And it, the most important thing is there is always acknowledging it. And just like what you've seen in the video, you can always say, oh yeah, I know you want to talk about, Stranger Things or whatever. I don't have any topic in my mind, but right now we're talking about, if you're doing play or if you're doing math. So you're always kind of redirected, but always make sure that we acknowledge that. And again, we have those tendencies like, oh, it's just like an accidental touch. They might be just scrolling and they touch like, I want to go to the bathroom. Oh, you know what? Do you really want to go to the bathroom? I think you just went. Let's complete this and maybe we can go a little bit later. You always find to redirect, something like that. And those are just like kind of examples. A lot of the kids, I think when we did this training, some of the question is like, what if the kid starts to just, try to just continue pressing an icon or just tapping on the iPad or something like that. And that's when I always say, you can say, you know what, we're playing right now, or you know what, you can just take the AAC first and said, oh, you know what, this is what we're doing right now. This is your device, and you can present it again, and you will say, I know you want to play, but let's just, do this or whatever you're doing. Let's continue to play first. Our tendency when a child starts to messing around, is we take the device out, just put it in their backpack because they're just playing with it. And that happens. And I get that. We have a lot of kids that it's true. They just either auditorily stimulate on that, or just visually stimulate, get visual stimulation on that. And that's when you just really take it out of their vision and say, oh, we're not playing right now. This device is actually your communication device. And it will just be that. But, that's not a reason for you to just take that AAC device and put it in a backpack or put it in a cupboard. Just make sure that we continue, and that's how important it is. That's what I've said. It really empowers the communication, or the AAC user, and that's why this is a very, very important strategy also.
And remembering to give it back too is a huge one, because I can't tell you how many times I've been in a classroom and I'm like, where's their device? And it's in their backpack. And they haven't had it for 2 hours. So your voice doesn't work that way. You don't just remove your voice for 2 hours and then get it back. So make sure it's a reasonable amount of time if you do have to kind of pull it and remind them what the purpose of it is for. We want it to be the most positive experience because we want them to learn and grow their language with it.
Okay. So next for the s'mores, the other R is repeat.
In. Okay. All right, let's see. How about we'll do the white one first. We're going to put the white one in. Okay. One. Look at listen. Good job. Let's see. How about we're going to put another one in. How about we'll do green. Green one in. Job. Put it in all by yourself. Put it all the way in. Let's see. Next we have, let's do brown. We'll put the brown one in. Yes. Favorite color. Brown. Good job. I love blue. High five. Good job. Okay. Which one should we put in next? Tell me what color. Should we do blue? Or should we do blue? Put it in.
Okay. So this is the R, repeat. So if you saw in the video, I kept repeating in because that's what I was targeting with him. So you want to use utterances repeatedly, but in a natural way. You don't want it to be robotic, and you don't want to just say the target word over and over again. You want to pair it with other appropriate words. Like I chose to pair it with colors in that particular video. And let's see. Okay, and you want it to be fun and functional and fast. So you want them to get as much exposure as possible, but you want it to be engaging and fun. So if it's not fun, then you need to end the task and find something else that's a little more engaging. Because like I keep saying, we want this to be a positive experience for them. Let's see. Do you want to add anything, Jack?
Yeah, it's the modeling of a lot of words or phrases many times in a variety of ways and different contexts. Janelle uses in. There's a lot of words there, and so it's really important. And we're gonna touch a little bit of it. It's like it's important that we plan those vocabularies or words that we want to use so that you are ready. Janelle's just used to it, but I think this is one of the hardest when I'm doing it because I'm not, well, first and foremost, English is my second language. So sometimes that repetition of finding that functional word or, making it fast. The fun, well, I'm not really that fun of a person, I guess, but that's why I'm having a hard time. But again, it really is important that we plan those vocabularies because it helps you a lot, when we're talking about the repetition. But again, it really is important, just like what Janelle said. When you're talking to an infant, we really keeps repeating our words, repeating, when we're talking about ball, red ball, big ball, it's the same thing. This is how our students learn with regards to learning this AAC or their new language, their new AAC system. So that's repeat.
Okay, Jack, before you start your next video, I just want to give you guys a heads up that we are 11:34, okay?
Okay.
Now, for E in the s'mores is expand.
Do play. So you wanna go play? Yeah. Go play. Where?
Did it stop?
Yeah, it stopped.
Go ahead.
That was the whole thing though. So expand. So if the AAC user is at maybe the one word level, so they're activating one word like you saw in the video, our goal is to add, you repeat back that one word and you add another word to it. So you're expanding their utterance. So if they're at the 2-word level, let's just say they're using 2 words, then you're gonna, repeat back those 2 words and add another meaningful word. So you're really trying to expand their utterances, but in a natural way, so I don't know if you have anything to add on that one.
Yeah, just make sure that it's within that, I know teachers also remember that zones of proximal development. So when you're adding words, make sure that it's within that, their vocabulary. You don't go crazy with the big words, or you don't go too low, especially when you're working with your middle schoolers or high school. Making sure that it's within that realm of the vocabulary just to expand. And again, this is really important, especially for those um, partial verbal kids that needs AAC to augment their communication, because this is going to help them go from a 2 word to a 3 word phrase or sentences. So again, if you know, based on assessment and intervention, your implementation plan that these kids are 1 word, so you want to expand at least, you know, to 2 words. You know, if they are in 2 words, then go to 2 to 3 or 4 simple words. But don't go crazy in expanding from 1 to a full 4 word sentences. So we just have to make sure, again, always remind yourself about that zones of proximal development, because that always give you that rule of thumb of how much do I span and how many words do I expand with those core vocabularies that I'm teaching. So go, and now we stop. That's the last from our s'mores. And this is really, really important. So let me play the video first.
Tallest animal is a giraffe. He is very tall. Yes, he's tall. Okay. This is the biggest animal, the whale. He is very big. He's big. And then, ooh, this is the smallest animal. Can you tell me a little bit about him? Little. Yes, very, very little. Good job.
So this is the last part. And so we want to give the AAC user plenty of opportunities to communicate. And sometimes it takes them a while, just like with us, when we first see the device, we're like, oh my gosh, we're overwhelmed. So we have to give them time. And in that particular video, it was 10 seconds. And some might need 30 seconds. So you want to just respect them and give them time to find things. You want to pause before you're modeling, during, and after. So he was basically in that video modeling kind of what his expectations were, you know, and paused and gave the AAC user enough time to actually make a comment. And like I said, sometimes it's a long time, and we're in such a fast-paced world. We just expect things to be so instant. But learning how to stop and wait. And like I said, that was only 10 seconds. Some kids I've seen kids that need 30 or 40 seconds to respond.
Yeah, and why do we want to stop? Why do we need to pause? So this gives the AAC user to process verbal instruction. I mean, some of them, not that they don't understand, but some of them may have some auditory processing issues that they need that time to process those verbal information. Number 2, formulate a reply. Sometimes they process it quick, but then they are trying to learn because it's a new thing for them, and this will give them time to formulate their reply, whether that's a 1 word or 2 words. And number 3, which is really, really important, is that it helps them to motor plan their actions. A lot of these kids, especially for whether they're nonverbal or partial verbal kids, have issues with what we call a motor planning. For us, it's really quick. You know, if you reach on something, you know, do some purposeful activities. But for them, just to motor plan, to point to 1 or 2 icons, they need processing time. Why? Because they need to, again, process that verbal instructions, and then how do I move my arm and my index finger so I can point, I like cookies. And for them, they need those 10 seconds or more for them to do that. So that's really, really important. Again, don't just stop like before, just like what, you know, sometimes we can provide for before. Example of before is like we can give them like a jar with something inside and just put it in front of them and wait. Now, if they don't, then you start counting that 10 seconds, 1001, 1002, 1003, and there you get your 10 seconds. And if they don't respond, then you start your modeling and say, oh, open jar, open something. And then if they still don't, then again, you can always do that. During is when, things are happening, and when during that activity, again, same thing is like pause in the stop, but you always pause and count that again. And after at least making those kind of comment, I think during is like more of what the video is doing. And also after modeling again, after you model, give them that 10 seconds again. That's the after modeling, and making sure that we're giving them that chance. Your kids, and when you're teaching this to families, you can always give those range to families and say, you know what, most of the time his processing or her processing is between 10 to 30 seconds. So you want to play with it depending on the day. And some days it might be just 5 seconds, but some days it might actually be 30 seconds. So again, that performance always varies. So make sure that you kind of note on that. So again, with regards to stop, make sure that, you are calm and composed, and wait expectantly, so that they know that, you look into their face that, oh, I think, my communication partner is expecting a response from me, but patiently and calmly. So are really good posters you can print out and give to parents also, because this just gives them a reminder on that waiting. Again, at least make that 10-second rule. So things to consider with regards to AAC implementation. We cannot cover the whole AT implementation, or how to create an AT plan. That will be a different training if everyone wants that. Usually, when me and Janelle do a complete training of AAC, we do a whole day training. We did it with early childhood in Region 10. But in terms of AAC implementation and or plan, make sure that we're really looking at specific environment. And most often than not, it's home and school. So right now, because we are doing distance learning, so it's home. And then making sure that we have a consistent, for now, 2 or 3 familiar opportunities. So choose, it could be, during breakfast time, during play time, and during play in the backyard, and just go from there. And again, we have to make sure who are those people that are going to be involved, so that it's going to be more predictable and it's more consistent. And everyone should be trained for whoever that communication partner is. So it's really, really important to structure it, especially when you're just beginning to teach, or just a child just got their AAC device, to make sure it's very structured. You want to add something, Janelle?
I was just going to add, environment is huge. So if they're at home right now, looking at things that are in their routine that they're doing on a regular basis, those are the times that it's really important to make sure that we utilize the AAC in those different times of the day. So it could be bath time. Think about things that they do daily, depending on their age. Maybe obviously at mealtime, we're going to eat a few times a day. That's a really good time. It's kind of structured. Think about things, taking a bath. You do that every day, brush your teeth, and playing. So we either have a lot of time right now to play, or we don't hardly have any time because we're working from home. But playing is another really good time and opportunity to practice things and practice using it. And I did develop a little sheet, and we can attach it to this. And it really gives you different ideas and how to target language and different routines throughout your day.
Okay. So again, we're not going to do hands-on programming, but when you are thinking of programming an AAC system, make sure these are really important um, things to consider. So
So,
your core words and French words, right?
okay, so your core vocabulary is makes up about 80% of the vocabulary that we use on a regular basis. So we tend to utilize the same words over and over and over again. That's why that vocabulary is so important. And in all the videos that you saw, I was pretty much only using core vocabulary. So it's pretty easy to construct an entire message just utilizing core vocabulary. Let's see. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add. There are some core vocabulary lists that you can find. A lot of times, even if you just Google it, you could find large lists of core vocabulary. Like if you're going to make maybe a low tech or no tech AAC device, you could find the core vocabulary just by simply Googling it. Your French vocabulary, that's the vocabulary that's very specific to specific environments. Like if you went to a doctor's office, there's going to be some vocabulary there that you probably don't say other times. If you're going to go to the zoo, you're probably going to be talking a lot about animals. So that vocabulary would be very specific to the zoo. So let's see. So it's more nouns a lot of times. It's names of specific things, location, sometimes activities, depending on, you know, where you are. Let's see, did I miss anything? Special interests. So special interests, like if it's art class, then you're gonna have, you know, specific vocabulary for art class. But don't stress too much about fringe vocabulary. Like I said, you can construct majority of your message with core vocabulary. Like I feel like I've seen teachers, if they're going to talk about animals, they feel like they need to add every single animal that's in a story. But you could talk about the animals using the core vocabulary, just like you saw in the video with my husband and my son looking at the book. That was just core words. There were no animals on that page, so he decided to focus on describing the animals. So I don't know, is there anything you want to add, Jack?
That's it. So I think the most important part, thing, and I'm gonna reiterate again, is don't turn your AAC device into a choice board. Make sure that there's a combination of both core vocabularies and French vocabularies to make sure that, you know, the child will be able to use it in multiple environments. And also our tendency is, oh, my child, well, or my student can only do this, and so I'm just gonna limit it to 4 icons, or, you know, I'm just put more of the things that, you know, he or she understands. Those are things that, you know, those are our pitfalls when we're trying to program the device. Uh, Again, there's a lot of ways, and that's why it's really important that when we're looking at an AAC system, that it's a multi disciplinary, multi-team. All the IEP teams are involved in the assessment process, because we have to really look at some of those visual skills. Remember, when we are, you know, whether that just to augment, or if it becomes the child's main communication device, this is the language of the child already. And it goes from oral communication, vocal, you know, speech communication, to become like using your fine motor skills. And so it's always important that you have an assistive technology specialist in there, or your OT is involved, knowing that, you know, how is the scanning of this kid? You know, how is the fine motor and finger isolation of this kid? You know, so those are really important things to consider when programming an AAC system. Our tendency sometimes is we're trying to limit the vocabulary instead of, you know what, let me just do some programs. So I'm gonna show you some of the stuff that I'm talking about. Okay, so I'll go a little bit of this quick. So when you're planning, so the strategies are as important as the programming, because I think this is when it um, there's what we call a device abandonment, is because sometimes some people do an assessment, they provide an AAC device, and they just drop it to the teacher, and voila, that's it. You know, there's no training, there's no programming. So again, when I'm talking about the icons, this child, or I don't know if he can pinpoint to this number of squares or something like that. So most of the time they go and you will have something like this, and it's like, oh, that's too much. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how if my child will be able to combine one or two words. So this is like a protocol to go. But the thing is, when you program and put the appropriate vocabulary, you can actually, especially if you have an emergent AAC user, you can actually program it to where you can hide some of the icons or majority of the icons, just to get for the child to be able to get used to it. And then later on, you start bringing in more and more and more icons. So it can go from this to this is the same thing, but I hide some of the icons. Now you can always just go and say,
Go. Play. Go play.
So you can just basically use this when doing play, and you can say go.
Go. Outside.
Go play outside. You can, so when you're doing that, it's really important that you are ready for different stuff. So when I'm on a snack time, I can actually go and say snack, and I can just go in there and say,
Like. Juice.
I like juice. It depends. So you can always go from there. Now, if you really don't know what to do, if you have kids that is using ProLoco, a lot of us don't really know that there's actually what they call a progressive vocabulary. And progressive vocabulary, you don't know. So let me go back to my first sample. Now, you don't know what to erase. You don't know what to hide. So if that happens, what you can do is you use this. Don't worry about, I know I'm going a little bit fast, but I am sending also some cheat sheet in terms of ProLoco. And these are things that are included in there: how to delete, how to add, how to hide these things. So with this one, I'll go, and I'm gonna go vocabulary. I will turn on the progressive language. And if you go step 1, now see how it will just adjust and just delete some of the words. And this, when they design this, it is actually more of, like these are the most common core words for the different ages. And so they made it into different steps. So when you click on step 2, you see how it starts adding more and more and more icons until it becomes a full layout. So as I said, I'm just want to show you that it's as important, the strategy is as important with programming the whatever AAC device you have, because it's necessary that the child will be able to access it, and we're calling that operational competence, so that they don't get so overwhelmed. I know we're running out of time. We can go a little bit with questions. So things to consider. Again, the most important part is don't pressure yourselves. Try to structure it. Don't expect that, I got this device and I will have 40, 50 communication exchange, tomorrow or for this week. Always make sure to give yourself time to learn, making sure that you get training. Just to give you an example, this is like just a sample of what small commitments a team can have. And this is given that, we have our regular opening, and if not, if you're just working with parents, always just start with them. Hey, let's just do, 10 minutes of 2 minutes of opportunity 3 times a day. So this is just like a sample intervention time for different communication partner. You can always vary that. And again, start slow, start with a short duration. So not everyone is pressured. And again, it's just about modeling, and making sure you go back to that cake. That cake, it's always going to the bottom. Exposure, exposure, exposure. You want to add something, Janelle? We have this reference, and thank you. And we will take questions. Are there questions in the?
So actually, Jack, I just want to tell you guys some of the comments. One said, thank you, this is great. I think we are all focusing more on vision, hearing, and auditory processing, even with the normal hearing, as very impactful on auditory processing times when using an AAC device. Mary Ann said she loved you were using the book with the device, but the chat now or anyone can actually ask question. If you have any question with the presentation, this is the time that you can ask. I know that Janelle would do this training. Usually it would be a day, the whole day, and we only have an hour to do this. There will be a follow-up training based on how what are the needs of the teachers. But the question now, I mean, it's open now for questions. So please unmute yourself if you have any question for Jack or Janelle. Please unmute yourself if you have any. Oh, Marilyn said, thank you for this overview of AAC. Thank you, Marilyn.
Yeah, it's really important that we kind of individualize those intervention plan depending on your students. So
and I've been guilty with the use of AAC too. And I know when I was in the classroom, I will get frustrated or sometimes like, okay, it's okay, I'm just gonna put it away or something because I feel like the student is not really using it and they don't know. Because sometimes we just assume that if we provide something, students will be able to do it automatically. So we still have to remember that we have to teach it and we have to be patient as well. I know Adriana would probably be able to share something about one of her students who has an AAC device, but it's always in his backpack. And every time they took it out for him, he's been pinching and pinching. So maybe you guys could help Adriana when we get back to the classroom and help that child with the use of his AAC device.
yes. So together with the PowerPoint, we'll actually give you the cheat sheet if you're using, we only have Proloco right now, the cheat sheet for Proloco and how to add all those, how to delete, how to make things invisible and things like that. So we'll provide that. And also, Janelle, at the beginning of this distance learning, made like your weekly core vocabularies. So I know Janelle kind of emphasized how important it is to focus on those core vocabularies. So we'll provide that also as part of handouts or part of the resources for this training. It really is important to really focus. When me and Janelle is doing training, we kind of like as a team decide on, depending on the kid, 3 to 5 core vocabularies to start with, and then we'll go from there. And it doesn't necessarily be used to all environment and to all opportunities. We will just choose as appropriate that vocabulary, maybe for home during snack time or for school during math time, things like that. So it really is really important. I'm going to reiterate how important it is to create that implementation plan. And again, if people are interested, those are things that we can.
Jack and Janelle, what do you think our teachers would be able to do? Let's say you guys didn't do, I know you guys are doing most of the AT assessment for some of the districts as well, but what do we do? What do you suggest to our teachers if they get a student with and then the district just gave them, okay, we had an AT assessment for this particular child and this is the device, but there's no training. How do we do with it? What is your advice? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, really, it goes back to, you know, we're RCUE. So if you need help, just you can always email us. I know we have contracts with some of the districts, and so we with that one, me and Gina was able to. But that doesn't mean that even for those who doesn't, and you just need training, it could be through a PLC, or if you really need training for your staff, you just have to email me or Janelle or both of us, and we can do, you know, an actual training for your classroom staff,
Or just
especially if you
call
have
Amy.
2 or 3
Call
kids.
Amy to do it for you.
What? No, don't call me.
No, so before I let, so I just wanted to give you a little update on the student that does not allow his iPad. What was happening towards the end before we closed. What I started to do is just bring his iPad close to the area where he was working, and slowly he was starting to tolerate having his communication device as his iPad next to him. So he was no longer throwing it every time he got it, and he actually used it a couple of times right before
Hey.
we closed.
So that's what they were saying about the cake. And now I would look at that cake and we have those layers of skills that we need to do, or strategies that we have to do. And that's basically what they're talking about, you know, exposure. So sometimes we just jump into that, like, okay, they should be able to communicate. Sometimes all we need to do is just have that child exposed to the device and get familiarized with it. Am I right, Janelle?
Yes, absolutely. I think too, like, I don't know the backstory about that student, but if it's not implemented the right way, and it hasn't just had the student hasn't been exposed to it and all of the stuff that we talked about, it can have a negative association. So it sounds to me a little bit like maybe that's what maybe happened to that student, but I have seen that before. If it's used as a choice board, or it's just, you know, expected that the child uses it without any sort of exposure, then a lot of times they will have that negative association and they will throw it or turn their body away from it. I have seen that before. So that's why we keep really emphasizing we want this to be a very positive experience for the AAC user. And the way that you do that is just by exposure, exposure, exposure.
Especially if you're using an iPad with an AAC app, that we have to make sure that that device is a dedicated device, meaning that is just a device for communication, period.
Yeah,
And I
and
know a lot of teachers or sometimes parents gonna ask like, oh, can I add this? It's educational, you know, it's educational app anyway. Oh, he's just gonna use this for this anyway. It's like, no, the child needs to learn that that powerful device is a device for communication.
one more thing I want to add is just that, just for just so you guys know a little bit more, that classroom was without a teacher for a while, so there was no consistency whatsoever. I've only had those students for 6 weeks, so yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that have changed, and we were just making small progress.
You're doing a great job, Adriana. So we really appreciate you. And it's a process. So hang in there. What about those kids, guys, that has some like partial verbal, but you cannot understand? And I know I've been seeing this with some of our classroom staff too, like, or actually it was one of the parents who said that if the child actually verbally said, I want strawberries, and then the parents would say, no, you have to put it in your device. How do we address that? Or they approximate the word strawberry. It could be estrogen or whatever, but we know that that's strawberry, but they would say, no, you have to do it. Or say, again, I'm putting you on the spot.
So if they're verbal, I always say that's the most natural mode of communication. So we really want to honor that. And if the device is just being used to augment their communication, you know, and you want to show them, let's just say they approximated strawberry, but maybe a stranger or somebody else unfamiliar wouldn't know, you can just use their device back. Oh, you want strawberries? Okay. But I wouldn't expect them to use the device if they're saying it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Hillary said, accept their,
as
yeah,
a
Jack.
we always ask that if an unfamiliar person could not understand that, then let's clarify, just like when I talk, because sometimes I talk fast and they don't understand me. So my staff would tell me, oh, can you repeat that, Jack? So it will be the same thing. Oh, I did not understand that. Can you repeat that? And you can just always present the device. And I think that one of the biggest thing here that I want everyone to know is like, even with the AAC device, it will always going to be a total communication system. You will accept those nonverbal communication, not just the verbal, not just the AAC. So again, when you have AAC, it's not going to be too strict, like, no, you will only answer through AAC. No, it's not the way it is. So you still have to use that total communication system. They're going to use those gestures. They're going to use, verbal, especially if they're partial verbal, and then they can use the AAC. So making sure that those are all going to be accepted as appropriate to the situation.
Yeah, Hillary just made a comment, accept their preference of communication and then model. So basically that's what Janelle said. Thank you, Hillary.
Yeah, I have a question if you don't mind.
Okay.
I have a student that I'm going to have the IEP meeting next week. 3-year-old just entering preschool, mild to moderate hearing loss bilaterally. Their receptive language is about a 2-year-old, but their expressive is about a 1-year-old. And they don't do many signs. And I mean, I'm going to use more ASL with this child, but I was wondering if an AAC would help to also bridge the communication gap.
I would say absolutely. I think I know who you're talking about. But I would say yes, definitely. I mean, maybe not the different systems that we showed you, but there's other stuff out there that lessens cognitive demands, like maybe a visual scene display, but you would still utilize all of these strategies, just maybe not like a grid display.
Yep, it might be a different application, but yes, I do agree.
Great, and Janelle, yes, you do know who I'm speaking of. Maybe we could talk about that later. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
I have a question also about a hearing impaired child. If we know that he can't hear the output, like the example you showed earlier that was go outside, I would assume that part of the child's learning is a reinforcement of hearing the device say, go outside. But if the hearing loss is such that they can't hear the output of the device, do you train in a different way, or how do you reinforce that this is actually a way for the child to communicate? And this would be for a child who doesn't sign, maybe doesn't have the dexterity, and so ASL is not an option or hasn't been successful.
So it depends on their cognitive level too. Like I said, there's other things out there, visual scenes where you could take a picture of something and highlight different areas. It really depends on their cognitive abilities too. But once they see these things over and over again, they're gonna make those connections as long as it's being used in real time. So they will recognize that these icons represent those things that they're experiencing. So I think that, I mean, obviously the better access to sound, the better overall, but I feel like just being able to see it visually should really help. Well, I hope that answered your question.
And the voice output might actually help the communication partner, the staff, more of that, gaining attention and all of that. It may not help her with the voice output for providing additional feedback, but it helps on the other side of the communicator. So.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Jack.
Yes.
It's Erica. So I have a student who uses the Proloquo, but she has figured out every password that we have put into her iPad to block it, and she deletes stuff. Is there a way to make a harder password? You know who I'm talking about too.
And I'll be honest with you, we have one that we even uses a very high-tech device. It's not even an iPad, and he's the one who always locks us out.
He locks us out all the time and she changes the password. And it's on the it's in the Proloquo program itself, so it's not even like we can reset it.
Yeah. I think there's more in terms of restrictions now. You can put on password on top of the passwords. So
Okay.
we can talk about that. But I think with the new updated Proloco, I think that's one good thing now is even before turning on the edit mode, you have to have the password. So you have
Okay, we can make a harder password to get into the
password and
password.
another password. So
She keeps deleting things all the time. It's like, oh, it's gone. Where'd it go?
Okay, Erica, you need to reach out to Jack so he can show you how to do that. We want to make
She's
sure
too
that that child
smart for
has
her own good.
yeah, I know the student.
So one more thing, who do I reach out for? Someone, I have a student with an iPad, but no one knows the password. I mean the Proloquo password.
Who owns the iPad?
It's an RCOE. Well, it's the students. I guess Albert.
Yeah, so whoever owns the iPad, if it's Alboard, then it will be their IT. If it's our iPad, then it will be our IT.
I also, well, because I also think that my classroom iPad has a password now, and it's not the one that used to be. So I don't know how it got changed. So with that also to
we're gonna have to reach out. If it's an RCOE iPad, we can reach out to Laura and she could help us with that one.
yeah, because I think that my classroom
Reach out to
iPad-
me and I will relay that info to Laura. Jack and
See, I told you,
Diana.
I'll do everything for you.
I have another question, guys. She said maybe this is a silly question, but we have students with lower cognition, hearing, and vision impairment. So the question is there any AAC that does not rely on vision as much?
Yes.
Yes. So there are different AAC systems like Words for Life. They have it to where you could change the background and make the background dark and then the icons light, or they have a key guard. So they don't necessarily have to look. They can kind of feel where things are located. I only know of that one, Jack. Do you know?
There's Go Talk now for visually impaired. So there's like they can kind of touch. So there's like some symbols. So it comes with a whole set. It goes with the Go Talk app. So those are the newer system, but you have to buy the whole set, and you kind of like change from there and go. But yes, there's that for the visually impaired kids, and you can always again go from just 8, 16 to just 4 or 2, whatever icon per page. But yes, there's one, and I really like it.
Thank you. Any other question? All right. Are we good? Can you give me guys a thumbs up if you're all good? We appreciate your time today. I know it's a Friday and it was gloomy earlier, but thank you guys for attending. It is another learning opportunity, and we hope that you're able to share this with families considering our, current situation. We appreciate you, Janelle and Jack. Thank you so much for giving your time to us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Recording. Thank you, guys. Have a great weekend.